Any good stories from the road?
Pipe up.
I wish we'd gotten seen a little bit more out of our punter.
I'm starting to puke.
It makes my stomach hurt.
I thought he was going to die.
I'm starting to throw up in my mouth a little bit.
He's on the probiotics.
Is Georgia playing the 1985 Bears this weekend or what?
A lot of Todd talk.
Rat poison proof.
They're mongoose.
We will not be hunted at the University of Georgia. I can promise you that. The hunting that we do will be done from us going the other direction.
Welcome into the Georgia show. Love to see the engagement from Tyler Brennan, Uncle Glenn Hartley, Reich 37. Y'all are some damn good dogs yourselves hopping in before we even hit live on this thing. Jake Rowe, Palmer Toms, damn good dogs as well. Palmer, welcome into the show. Caught up with Jake a little bit after that Vandy smackdown yesterday, but I want to hear your thoughts to start the show. What are some sticking points, some points from this game that stuck with you after you got a chance to rest on it, my man?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really important for Stetson Bennett to get rolling again. This passing game needs to get rolling again. For him to go 24 of 30 on the day, had a stretch there in the first quarter of 14 straight completions. I think he was 15 of 16, 15 of his first 16 there. To get rolling like that was really important. We heard from the players post game that was something that they put an emphasis on this week in practice. They felt like they had a really good week in practice, and to see it pay off like that, obviously not against an opponent like the ones that they will be playing down the road, but sometimes it takes a get right game like that. Georgia has not been right in the passing game the last 3 weeks before this. So for Georgia to have a game like that in the passing game, and it extended to Carson Beck, who went 8 of 11, 2 touchdowns, 387 yards on the day total for Georgia through the air. 11 different guys catch passes. We saw the run game, the resurgence of the run game last week against Auburn. The passing game certainly seems to be back versus Vanderbilt.
Yeah, that was the main point for me when I spoke with Rowe was just, Georgia had so much to address about itself. Oh, the Dogs can't run the ball. They can't do good stuff in the red zone. Stetson Bennett can't throw worth a lick. He can't, run this offense with explosive plays, and they didn't really need him to do it against Vandy. But I think Georgia answered a lot of those questions that it had about itself. Now, the opposition down the road, a lot tougher, and I think Georgia's pretty fortunate that the schedule set up that the way that it did. I mean, you escape against Mizzou, but you have that game against Tennessee early on in the year when you traditionally play them. Or think about how much we've talked about that Auburn and Tennessee game switching on the calendar. What if Georgia's still working some things out with its offense and you got to play Tennessee a little bit earlier in the season? I think that has some butterfly ripple effects on this season potentially as well.
Yeah, it could. One of the things I was thinking about with Tennessee was, they had a little bit of issue there with Pitt, who I think we kind of have learned is not a great football team. But it's really a week-to-week thing. I mean, what if Tennessee catches Georgia on South Carolina or a Oregon type performance? I'm sure Tennessee was going to have Georgia's attention there. We're going to get into all that here in just a little bit, but it does kind of raise the eyebrows a little bit, the challenges of doing things. And Auburn all of a sudden moves Georgia to October, and they can't beat them in October. They weren't really beating them in November either. But,
they can play them in March. I don't think it really matters.
Right. Yeah. And, Tennessee's trying to flip the script. And, I'm really interested to see that first college football playoff bowl.
Yeah. I mean, Jake, you point out it comes out that Tuesday before that game. And I was having some conversations with some folks today, maybe a little bit of a conspiracy theory, maybe a little bit of a discussion about that potential first playoff poll. If everything shakes out the way that we expect and Georgia and Tennessee are coming into that game undefeated, we could be looking at a 1-2 matchup, and there's a chance that Tennessee would be the one. I think that they would have we talked about Georgia's win over Oregon being the most impressive win. Tennessee probably would have a leg up there with that Alabama win. They would also have a ranked win against Kentucky assuming that Kentucky is ranked.
Don't sleep on Kentucky when it comes to Tennessee's schedule. I feel like I'm having to
know,
double down on the Wildcats because I said in the offseason that Kentucky worried me for Georgia's sake than Tennessee did. Now, I didn't know that Tennessee was going to be hell on wheels to this extent, but I did think with Kentucky having the home game against Georgia and Georgia having the home game against Tennessee, the physical nature that Kentucky tends to play with. And look, I'm not going to take anything away from Tennessee. The Vols looked pretty physical against Bama last night too, but it's been talked about on our message board. I don't know that this Bama team is even in the top 10 of some of Saban's most physical teams either. So there's a lot of comparison games that you can't really play when it comes to college football. But like you said, Palmer, could be 1-2, could be Dogs 1, Vols 2, or flip-flopped, or 1-3. Who knows?
Well, Wes, and you mentioned that physicality of Kentucky. That's certainly going to weigh on Tennessee coming into that game too. I mean, we talk about
Georgia's bye week sets up really well. I think
it absolutely
does.
I mean, Georgia needs it to get healthy, but also as you look at how those teams are going to be coming in, Tennessee has 2 games between now and then. They don't have a bye week. Now, granted, one of those is against UT Martin, but they still got to put on pads. There's a chance you could get hurt. As Georgia,
the University of T. Martin will need a little bit more help this time around.
Yeah. But, I do think that it'll be very interesting to see that first college football playoff poll when it comes out. Still got a lot of time until then, a little bit of time. We're going to see Georgia play another game. We'll see Tennessee play 2 before then. And then, come that week, we'll be talking about the Dogs and Vols. We're going to talk about them tonight, but I think that at that point, it's going to be the center of the college football world's attention.
Reich 37 says, how much would y'all pay to sit in on Alabama's film watch with their players and soak up the misery? I think that would probably be a pretty expensive ticket for a lot of fans, not just Georgia fans or Tennessee fans around the country. A lot of people enjoying the demise of Bama. I don't think they're quite done just yet. Maybe they're not the best team, but they tend to find a way to get better as the season goes along, even when they do lose. But yeah, that's an expensive ticket, almost as expensive as some of the Georgia-Tennessee tickets I'm seeing on the third-party sites, going from anywhere from $300 a pop in the 300 sections to over 1,000, which is insane. But we'll see what happens in a few weeks. But there is a lot between now and that game, and it does involve a Georgia bye week when they get to kind of bask in the glow of being 7-0. Pretty good landmark, benchmark for them right now, and they get to get healthy. We talk about that a lot too. And then they get to play Florida, and I almost wonder, guys, how tough the job is going to be the next couple of weeks to keep Georgia from looking past Florida. And that doesn't happen too often, but with Tennessee looming, I could see it being an issue.
I think it helps to have the bye week. When you have that, then maybe you've got a few days to kind of get that. We're trying to do this, or we're looking ahead at this out of your system, because you're going to have probably, I would imagine, 3 spring-like practices, fundamental heavy practices. They may get into kind of game planning for Florida on Thursday. But I think you're going to see Georgia, get it behind them, blow off some steam there, develop there a little bit before they really get into the game plan. And I think having the bye kind of helps them focus on the upcoming opponent. Not to mention you've got that trip and you've got the quirkiness of it and everything like that. I think it's something that's definitely going to hold the attention of Georgia's players. But you really also, you never can just completely rule out a look ahead. They happen, they happen in this sport. But I think Georgia may have learned that lesson a little bit here 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I like Matthew C's point here. Kirby was embarrassed by Florida 3 times as a player. He'll never let his team overlook Florida. He's Georgia Spurrier in that way. I think that's accurate, but you are still talking about college kids. They don't know what happened during Spurrier's reign of terror in Jacksonville. Uncle Glenn Hartley, welcome in, Unc. Any Carter news? Assume he's talking about Jalen Carter. I don't think we're going to find out any Jalen Carter news until maybe 3:29 p.m. Eastern time before Georgia plays Florida.
I'll be surprised if he's not available for Florida, if he doesn't pitch in and play some.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby was asked about, how healthy this team can be after that bye, and was asked if he thinks it'll be the healthiest that his team has been all year. He did not seem quite as optimistic. I think there's a lot of coach speak that's involved in that as well. Maybe wanting to throw some people off by saying, hey, we're not sure if we'll get, he said there's some of these guys that we're not sure if we'll get back at all. I think that he's probably just a little bit of a coach speak, trying to throw people off, throw Florida off, throw Tennessee off. A point that I made to somebody, that was asking me after that Tennessee-Alabama game, about Georgia and the looming matchups, the schedule that's tough. I said, I think we will learn a lot about this Georgia team. I don't know how much we know about this Georgia team still, because you look at this schedule, they haven't been fully healthy. They haven't really needed to be fully healthy. So are they the team that played against Oregon? That is absolutely when Georgia was the healthiest, because AD went down one play into that Samford game. So I think we'll learn a lot more about Georgia, the health of guys like Jalen Carter, AD Mitchell, Smile Munden, Kendall Milton, those four guys, 2 on offense, 2 on defense, really your key contributors that are banged up and absolutely need this bye week.
Thanks to everyone watching and listening right now. If you're catching us on a replay, hit subscribe. If you're watching live, hit subscribe, or listening on Apple, Spotify podcasts, hit follow on those as well, and leave us a review. Leave us a kind comment and go Dogs in the comment section. I want to highlight something right here, guys. This photo of Darnell Washington that's up on the screen. If you can zoom in, obviously the catch of Darnell is great, but if you can zoom in on this poor Vanderbilt defender's face, I'm not making fun of him. I'm not calling him out, because I'd look a lot worse. Trust me. I'd be needing to wear those black pants and hoping that I wasn't wearing white pants, because it would be just a horrific sight. But look at the reaction to trying to defend Darnell Washington. And the quote that Stetson Bennett had yesterday about saying that it was like trying to throw in the Pacific Ocean. Palmer, I know Jake and I talked about this right after the game, but the play where Darnell just kind of brings the ball in one-handed with his mitt, and Stetson's thrown it into a place where no one else other than the Statue of Liberty could defend the play. I'm wondering why they don't just run that play all the time, man. How do you even defend it?
Well, and I mean, especially in the red zone. I mean, it is absolutely amazing to me that Darnell Washington only has 1 touchdown in his Georgia career. Absolutely insane to me there, because of how big he is. And you would imagine that size would be so beneficial in the red zone, especially with some of the red zone woes that Georgia has had. Seems like they've gotten it fixed, but certainly, a concern that maybe is in the back of your mind if you're a Georgia fan, if you're Kirby Smart. And yeah, I mean,
maybe they're saving that last ditch emergency button play for Darnell that they just haven't unveiled yet.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, and we've talked about Tennessee. I texted with our On3 writer over at Bama Insider, Clint Lamb, last night after their game, and after watching Georgia's
Gosh,
game.
Can you imagine that message board today?
Yeah, I didn't even want to venture over there, because I would feel bad for Clint and that site. But asked him, hey, how do you think, you've obviously seen Georgia before, how do you think this Georgia team can match up against that Tennessee team? And he pointed to the tight ends, said that if you watch Tennessee, he paid a lot of attention to them this week. We'll pay a lot of attention to them in the coming weeks. They've struggled with the tight ends. Pitt, Florida, 2 teams that gave Tennessee a fight, down to the wire there. Both those teams used tight ends a lot. Cameron Latu had a big game for Alabama. So I think that a guy like Darnell Washington, who had a career day yesterday, career high in catches, career high in yards, certainly a guy like him, he's certainly going to be a big factor in a game like that. And we haven't talked about Brock Bowers with that either. You've got Eric Gilbert, who had an awesome moment yesterday. Something to celebrate is what Kirby said. Could he be a factor going forward? I wouldn't count on it, but I do think that that's a positive sign. Oscar Delp is certainly a contributor somebody that's capable of contributing. Georgia has those tight ends for what it lacks in the receiver room in terms of a scary receiver. They've got two incredibly terrifying guys at tight end.
Matthew C says, been saying it for years, Dogs should run the Chiefs-Falcons Tony Gonzalez special when Matt Ryan would just throw it up on that post route to Tony Gonzalez. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, no one else can catch it. That was a very successful play for the Birds back in the day. And they're starting to actually find some success right now too. Mean Muggin Mutt says, outside of getting healthy, what's the biggest things Georgia's coaching staff is focusing on this week? Jake, you touched on it, but let's dive into that. What is the between the ears mentality of a Kirby Smart-led football program, I should say, going into the bye week?
Yeah, blocking and tackling. I know that sounds simplistic, but I think going back and watching that game, better tackling out of Georgia, doing a better job of holding on to their blocks and staying with their blocks and not allowing that quick penetration. I think it's a good time to get kind of back to the basics of, your steps and your pad level and those little intricate, details that make the difference between, you allowing penetration or a guy picking up 7 or 8 extra yards. I think that's big. And, I think teams always need to work on it. I don't necessarily know that it's always like at the forefront of what they need to work on. A lot of times, a team will go into the bye week. They're trying to figure out a way to throw the ball downfield more, or they're trying to find a way to limit big plays in the passing game. And, tackling goes into bit limiting the big plays and blocking goes into the other. But I think Georgia's is mainly just honing up on the fundamentals of this game that can get away from you over the course of a long season. You work on that. You get better at those things. You kind of shore up some areas there. You get healthy. I think Georgia can get a lot better in a short period of time.
What's the story on Stetson Bennett right now after seeing his Auburn game where he just lit a charge into Georgia's offense with that huge rushing touchdown he had, and then yesterday lighting things up, starting fast, the big emphasis for Georgia? Do y'all need to see more out of Stetson against Florida to fully believe? And obviously, you want to see it for the rest of the season, or do y'all already start to feel, or are you already starting to feel a little bit better about Stetson kind of shaking his yips and shaking off some of his struggles from earlier on in the season?
I know it's in there. I know it's there. I know the raw ability and the capability is there. I know he's tough as nails and he's going to be available to play if he can hold his arm up. You're just not 100% sure it's going to show up. And, I was thinking about this earlier today. You're not 100% sure it's going to show up with anybody. I mean, you look at Bryce Young, and listen, I know he gets a lot of credit, okay, a lot of credit for the poise he had on that final drive against Auburn last year. There's a reason they had to make that final drive, and it's because Bryce Young didn't play all that great leading up to that point. Neither did Bama's offense, and he wasn't managing the offense. He wasn't running the offense.
Yeah, it's a unique skill set to have, right? Like, I'm clutch because I need to be clutch because I wasn't clutch before I needed to be clutch.
And you could do that to a lot of guys, right? You could do that to a lot of guys who had to come back in games or whatever. I get it. But, you can't really predict whether it's going to be there every time out. And quite frankly, when Georgia plays Tennessee, there is a 95 to 99.9% chance that Georgia's going to need Stetson Bennett to be really, really stinking good. There's a chance, and we'll get into it, that Georgia can win without its best offensive effort against Tennessee, but there's not a good one.
I don't like the chances of that after I know I'm a prisoner of the moment. It's recency bias, and it seems like the whole country is. Let's put Tennessee at number one, but I think that dispute will be settled when Georgia plays Tennessee. We did have some breaking news today on the recruiting trail, and I don't want to waste too much time talking about this Georgia-Vanderbilt game. Everyone saw it. Vanderbilt wishes that no one saw it, but they saw it.
Good news is a lot of people weren't watching it. They were watching another game that was happening at that same time. So not everyone saw it. Not everyone was watching. And
it was interesting to see Georgia's 3:30 kickoff game on the SEC network and the timing of it in real time compared to that CBS 3:30 game that ended, I think, a full hour later.
I mean, we were in the press conference with Kirby. Or waiting on Kirby, to as everyone was watching it, and Kirby, it seemed delayed, and we were all like, okay, we know what he's doing, we know he's watching this game, and about as soon as that kick sailed through the uprights, he walked in, and somebody asked him if that's why he was late, and he said, yeah, we walked in here, we came over when we thought it was going to overtime, and as we walked in, we heard about the made kick. So.
And we realized we couldn't keep y'all waiting any longer. We got some Cruton news. Jake Roos dialed in earlier today to tell me about Ryan Puglisi, the 3-star quarterback for now. I think everyone seems to feel like that star count will increase and improve as this kid gets more tape. But let's not delay. Here's Jake Roos, our actual DawgsHQ recruiting insider, on why the Dogs landed Puglisi and what makes him special.
Georgia's back on the board in the class of 2024, and this time it's at the most important position on the field. The Bulldogs secured the commitment of current 3-star Ryan Puglisi on Sunday evening following a stop in Athens for the win over Vanderbilt. And let me tell you, Todd Monken was very impressed with what he saw from this junior quarterback over a summer workout. Got the offer, Dogs ramped up pursuit in a major way. Puglisi was a priority. They reel him in. You check the film, not hard to see what Georgia was looking at here. Arm strength to spare, anticipates his receivers well, and he's also a very capable scrambler, a guy who can create with his legs, extend plays, loves some contact when he's out there also, so can do a little bit of it all. Regardless of what you think of this ranking, I encourage you to be encouraged by how heavily Georgia prioritized Puglisi, and also consider that he may not be in that 3-star range much longer. Dogs look to have found a gem here. I have no doubt that they absolutely think that's the case.
I know that a lot of those clips didn't show completions, but I'm not an expert. I know that doesn't really matter. You just look at that kid's height, his weight. I mean, he's a solid, sturdy kid, and I can't wait to see how much better he gets as he gets more film on tape. Hold on a second, Jake.
There we go. Sorry, I've been trying to mute my mic a little bit. I've been coughing and sneezing a little bit here. So, So I've watched this film for the first time here 2 or 3 days ago. Maybe it was late last week, and I tell you, man, I really was impressed by his ability to throw on the move, to show arm strength when he wasn't able to set his feet. He did that as a sophomore where he was 15, 16 years old, and put that, film out there. And I know a lot of people are going to bang on competition, right? They're going to be, oh man, well, none of these kids he's playing against are going to play in the SEC. He's playing with the same types of guys at receiver. I mean, you're throwing to guys who are being covered by guys with similar talent. And, there are a lot of tight window throws. There's a lot of seeing the whole field. And, I think projecting a quarterback to be really successful at the next level is very, very tough. But, I think the traits are there. And, Todd Monken, tell you what, and we were talking about it after the game, Wes, Todd Monken is put together a good little resume here at Georgia. He's taking a former walk-on kind of shaky quarterback and everybody ever thought he could start, helped him win a national championship. He's taking Carson Beck, who came in here in 2020 with a long way to go. And Carson Beck looks good now.
You mean Georgia can actually develop quarterbacks?
Yeah. I mean, believe it or not, that narrative's tired, believe it or not. And, I think this is a guy that they got on quick. Alabama's since offered. He's since got some other big offers. I believe Ole Miss has jumped into the mix as well. Lane Kiffin knows a little thing about quarterbacks. So, I'm interested to see where this kid ends up in the long run. because I do believe the tools are there to make a significant rise of the rankings.
If Mean Mug and Mutt's appraisal turns out to be true, a lot of Georgia fans are going to be happy. He says a Joe Burrow type quarterback. So we'll see. We'll see about that. Hopefully not fully Joe Burrow, because that means he would transfer away from Georgia and win a national championship somewhere else. Guys, I want to move ahead and talk about our dog stocks as we wrap up the show, head into the bye week. We know what we know about Georgia. We're not going to know the real story on this team until they start playing some other teams. So there's only so much we can pontificate about, but we can take our evaluations, our appraisals of what's going on around the dog stock market. And Palmer, I'll start with you tonight. Stock up, stock down. What you got?
Would stock up on Ryan Puglisi just be too easy? No,
I think it would be. That's acceptable.
I'm not going there. I am. I've had a stock down kind of weekend. A little bit of a run in with DirecTV, stock down on DirecTV.
Oh no!
Stock down. I know. We may be a YouTube TV family here before too long. No free shout outs. It's stock down on one of the AP poll ballots that had Ohio State at 1, Georgia at 2, Alabama 3, Tennessee was down at 6. I think that guy put in his ballot before the game was even played.
Yeah, I'm going to Calhoun's.
But I am stock down. My stock report here is stock down on ESPN's FPI. Just taking a look at this, there's a couple things that stand out. Ohio State is 1, Alabama 2, Georgia 3. Why is Alabama ahead of Tennessee? So somebody pointed out to me, well, this is a predictive thing. If Alabama and Tennessee were to play again, that Alabama would once again be favored. Fine. I don't have as huge of a gripe with that as I do some of these other ones. Texas is number 5. You cannot tell me that there are not 5 teams that would not be favored over Texas. Okay, let's continue. LSU is number 11. There's more than 10 teams that would be favored over LSU. And if I've paid any attention to college football, I know that. Baylor, who is 3-3 and lost over the weekend, 18. Notre Dame, also 3-3 and lost over the weekend, 21. A&M, 3-3, 22. There are some not so good teams ranked in this FPI way too high. So I am stock down. I am not high on the FPI, stock down on ESPN's FPI. How
do we fix it? I think we get rid of rankings altogether.
I mean, I do. Look, they're great content for us. I'm a big pay attention to the coaches poll, AP poll, but those are largely shaped. This goes back to that conversation we were having about the college football playoff poll earlier. Those polls that we're seeing, Georgia at number 1 in both of them, and Tennessee at 3 and 4, 3 in the AP, 4 in the coaches. Those are largely shaped on preseason expectations. I do enjoy the fact that the college football playoff poll comes out later in the season. Once you've seen these teams play, once you can really get a good idea for how good these teams are. There's no sort of, precedent set in August or September for what these teams, what their ranking is. That's why a lot of times we have seen the first college football playoff poll set a new precedent. Say, hey, I know the AP and we know the AP and the coaches say this, but we've got this team at number 1. We've got this team a little lower than y'all do.
It's week.
And that's why I don't think it would be
supposedly week by week, but I think there is some residual. Sometimes I feel like some weeks they mail it in. Don't y'all feel that way? Like there wasn't really much to examine. Let's just leave it the way it was last week.
There is, and it's that difference factor, the desire to be different that I think the college football playoff poll. That's why I would not be terribly surprised if Tennessee was the number 1 team in that first playoff poll over Georgia.
Well, I also wonder, with the looming decision to expand this thing to 12 teams, what kind of impact, if any, is that going to have on how they evaluate teams this year? Are they going to need to feel the need to make some crazy adjustments to who gets in and who doesn't, or or what happens. I mean, when I look at the Georgia-Tennessee matchup, and I don't know how much more y'all had to say about it, but, when I look at the ramifications, if they hold serve and if this is an undefeated matchup and then whoever wins and whoever loses wins out the rest of the way, I mean, you could look at a situation like Bama had in 2017 where they don't even have to play in the SEC championship. And I say that term with my tongue firmly planted in my cheek because you want to win the SEC championship, but don't act like one fewer game didn't help Bama stay fresher than Georgia that year.
Yeah,
Well,
that as a 4 seed playing, very close to home where Georgia had to play across the country, that's just the reality of it. That's just the way it went down.
And that this game that we're talking about with Georgia and Tennessee reminds me a lot of that 2019 and maybe not as talented teams, but that 2019 LSU and Alabama matchup. You probably, if Alabama hadn't slipped up there late in the season and lost to Auburn in the Iron Bowl, you probably would have seen those two teams in the playoff, regardless of who won that game and who played for the SEC championship and who won the SEC championship. I think that, we could be looking at two teams out of the East, assuming the East wins the SEC championship, two teams out of the East going to the college football playoff.
Jake, stock up, stock down?
I'm going to stock up on Todd Monken. Stock up on Todd Monken because he had forgotten how to coach. He has remembered how to coach. He forgot how to coach against Missouri. He forgot how to coach in the first half against Auburn. He remembered at halftime what it was like to score points. And here we are. Georgia has scored so many points now in the last 6 quarters. So that's big on him. Good for him. He's had a breakthrough. And I'm really happy for Todd Monken. 83 points, I believe it is, in the last 6 quarters. Stock down on Vanderbilt and Vanderbilt, Georgia. Listen, since Vanderbilt canceled that 2020 game, the Commodores have played 8 quarters against Georgia. The Commodores have scored 0 points, and Georgia has scored 118.
Yeah, that's more than enough. More than enough points. I tweeted
117-0. Also, last touchdown scored by Vanderbilt was with just a couple of seconds left in the 2018 ball game between these two teams. Last touchdown.
Yeah, I think some people at Georgia took that personal, and I think that people in the SEC took that a little bit personal too. Look at the TV money that all these SEC schools split for actually putting competitive products out on the field, and Vandy gets to show up to the party and collect just as much. And there's a lot that could be said about that, but I think the sentiment is shared and very real when it comes to beating down the Commodores.
Yep, no doubt about it, man. I mean, everybody would deny it, but I don't know. It just seems to me like something.
Yeah, we're never going to get anyone on the record to say that, but that's what this show is for. I'm going to say stock down on Nick Saban, and I know that's probably going to shock a lot of the college football world and everyone watching that. I don't mean for his legacy, obviously. I think that's firmly cemented. But when I saw Tennessee and Alabama in real time, and I was keeping up with the play-by-play and watching penalty Alabama, penalty Alabama, penalty Alabama, guys, I mean, I'm not used to seeing Nick Saban teams look that undisciplined, even on the road. I know that the crowd noise was going to factor in.
I mean, stupid muff punt.
Just dumb stuff that is, it's the stuff in the margin. I mean, I still believe that Alabama is a more talented, deeper team than Tennessee is, but Neyland Stadium is back. And when you aren't disciplined, you commit penalties, penalty after penalty, you're going to lose against really good teams like Tennessee. And I think just based on the conversations we've had about Georgia this season, we wondered after Mizzou, is this red zone issue the story of Georgia this year? Is this inability to have a lot of consistency in the ground game just the story of Georgia this year? Is Stetson Bennett's struggles passing the story of his season? And to this point, none of those things prove to be the true story of Georgia. But look at Bama. They've had this penalty bug stick with them since that Texas game. They haven't gotten any better about it, and it kind of is the story of their team this year. And at this point, you kind of are what you are. You can find ways to manage it. You can find ways to seal it off or improve from game to game. But I'm surprised in a Nick Saban team looking this undisciplined. So I got to go stock down on King Nick.
Yeah, I mean, last 2 games, 4 turnovers in one game, almost lost to Texas A&M at home. Go on the road to Tennessee and commit 17 penalties for 130 yards, turn it over at least one more time. I don't know if they did any more than that. I mean, like, man, I'd love to do it. I'd love to see somebody do it, somebody that has the time to do it and go back and really dissect what Alabama football has done, what they have accomplished, what trends have taken place since Nick Saban decided to say that for some reason that offenses were just ahead of defenses, and that's just how it's got to be.
When do you think that transition happened?
I don't know. I don't. I think it's kind of fool's gold as a real transition, because I still think defenses can beat good offenses.
Well, no, I'm saying
defense, so you don't have to give up. So you don't have to outscore somebody by score 52 to beat somebody. Maybe you just need to score 38.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not saying that a good defense can't win. Georgia certainly showed that last year. What I'm saying is, when do you think that transition happened in the mindset at Alabama? Because I think a lot of it has to do with the defensive coordinator leaving town and going back to his alma mater to be that.
Yeah, that may have had something to do with it. I think it also had something to do with maybe having to play a couple of shootouts against Clemson. Right there.
Look at their receiver recruiting and how it shifted to – they almost recruit the receiver position with an emphasis that like Ohio State does. And
with an emphasis that they used to put on linebackers and
running backs
and running backs,
linemen and dominating people physically, and that's what Georgia still tries to do. And I think we've seen Kirby Smart take a step towards that direction of let's put a lot of chips on the offense and maybe not only rely on the defense. But as you're seeing right now with this Georgia team, and I wanted to ask you guys about this Georgia team is doing really well defensively. They're obviously top 5 in the country. Bama was 2 going into that Tennessee game. But like I mentioned, I think the lack of discipline had a huge impact on that game that people aren't really talking about. They're just looking at it as, Tennessee's offense is better than Bama's defense. But we've seen some really good Kirby Smart defenses through the years, outlast that Oklahoma team, get pummeled by that 2019 LSU team. Have a couple shots at Bama last year, Bama in 2020. What are you guys seeing? And Roe, you've covered this team for several years. Palmer, you have too now. When you look at this Georgia defense and you compare it to some of those other Georgia defenses that had opportunities against really good offenses, and we didn't know how Georgia was going to hold up against them, are you seeing any kind of inkling, any kind of tea leaves here about how this Georgia defense may fare against a much better offense?
All those games you mentioned, Wes, not one of them was played inside Sanford Stadium. Neutral sites, played on the road, none inside Sanford Stadium where Georgia has the crowd on its side while the other team's on offense. So I think that helps Georgia a lot. Otherwise, I think Georgia's going to give up points. I think Georgia's only hope in this game when it gets ready to play Tennessee of just holding them to a low number is for the crowd to get into it, for Georgia to jump out quick and to kind of knock Tennessee off balance and take them out of their rhythm a little bit. Otherwise, I fully expect Tennessee's going to hang 24, 28, maybe 30 points on Georgia, and Georgia's going to have to score more than that. But I do think that Tennessee having to play on the road, I think they scored 34 on Pitt in overtime to win that game, with overtime included. And that one was on the road.
They got LSU at noon, which I don't really think.
And LSU, I believe, fumbled the opening kickoff. So you kind of gave the home field advantage away right there to begin with. But listen, I was there for that Auburn game a couple weeks ago, right? That was pretty live. That's pretty wild, pretty crazy. I've seen it wilder, no doubt about it. there hasn't been a game of this magnitude played in Sanford Stadium since probably Notre Dame. And
if not more,
yeah,
if not longer.
This one will probably have, this one will have probably a little more juice to it because of where it is.
Someone brought up the Arkansas game last year, but that game was early in the season, and I don't think – yeah.
The other thing that neither of those games had is SEC conference championship game.
Right. Division championship.
The division championship implications. I mean, you could have lost to Notre Dame and still made the SEC championship. You could have lost to Arkansas and still won the East because that they're not an East opponent. I think that Jake Long, you're to the point that you're making there. You don't shut down an offense like this. You slow down an offense like
slow
this.
them down.
And I think that like we're talking about with the crowd here, I do think that the crowd, when to go as fast as Tennessee wants to go, you have to be able to communicate. And communication gets that much harder when it gets that much louder. And so, I think that there's also a humbling factor, an emotional roller coaster factor. I don't know that you can ride the emotional high of beating Alabama, I don't know how long you can ride that. Tennessee fans are certainly going to try and ride that for as long as they can. They're
going to have to find some new goalposts to begin with.
Yeah.
Or drag them out of the river or wherever.
Those are in the river and torn apart, broken, snapped. Saw a video where you could hear the snap, and it was pretty wild. God. But I mean, it's just, you cannot. Championships aren't won on emotion, and I think that Jake, you disagree in here?
No, I'm just, my hand was itching.
Championships aren't won on emotion. You have to be an even-keeled team because things aren't always going to go your way. You're not always going to have the crowd behind you. I think that, and Jake, you mentioned this yesterday, I think that Georgia learned that lesson in 2017 when they had to go on the road to Auburn. I think Georgia learned that lesson in 2021 when they were, getting whipped up and down the field by Alabama in the SEC championship game. Kirby has said it before. Humbling is 1 week away in college football. And Tennessee is going to be riding that emotional high. But they may be coming into that game as the number one team. But if I recall, Georgia went into Auburn as the number one team, fresh off a number one ranking, and certainly didn't pan out that way.
College football is weird. It's why we love it. I firmly believe you can't predict a lot of these things with just these ironclad confidence that a lot of people want to think. But that's why we love it, man. You wake up Sunday and Tennessee's the talk of the college football world, and everyone's celebrating Alabama's demise, and they could come back and still beat everybody. They're never dead, and that's just how college football goes. That humility is a week away comment, Palmer. I think it's one of the great Kirbyisms. And I think it belongs on a t-shirt. And I think the people at Breaking Tea are fine partners. Maybe they want to consider that one day. You can check out the Breaking Tea lineup of apparel and merch at the link in this show's description. And check out the NIL partnership they got going on with several Georgia players: Stetson Bennett, Brock Bowers, Christopher Smith, and the Big O, Darnell Washington. It's all there for you. Look at that Georgia shirt you're wearing right now. You're tired of it, aren't you? You need a new one. Check it out at Breaking Tea. And we also invite you to take full advantage this bye week of our $1 for 1 year premium subscription at DawgsHQ.com. We had that recruiting nugget on Ryan Puglisi. I think there may be more to come on the Georgia front. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't know when it'll be, but just knowing Georgia football and Kirby Smart, he never, ever quits, not even on the bye week. So much more news to be had over there. Guys, thanks again. Enjoy the bye week. We will be back later this week, maybe an abridged show because it is a bye week. We'll get back to you on that. It just depends on what's going on. Depends on what news breaks and what needs to be discussed. But until then, I hope you guys enjoy this bye week. Give your hearts a rest. Watch some other teams. Chill out. and then watch the Dogs get back to work in that cocktail party. We didn't even talk about Florida at all, but we'll get to them eventually.
We
I
got
guess.
plenty of time.
Plenty of time. Thanks, y'all. Have a great week.
All right, Wes.